Have you ever noticed how every generation gets talked about except one? Boomers get blamed for everything. Millennials get mocked for avocado toast, and Gen Z gets analyzed like scientists studying a new species under a microscope. But somewhere in between, there's a generation that just quietly exists. Nobody makes memes about them. Nobody writes think pieces dissecting their habits. Generation X, the kids born between 1965 and 1980, slipped through the cultural cracks, and that's exactly why almost nobody understands what actually shaped their minds. Start with this image. It's a weekday afternoon, sometime in the late 1970s or early 80s. An 8 or 9-year-old walks home from school, alone, digs a key out from under a doormat or off a shoelace around their neck, and lets themselves into an empty house. No phone to check in. No camera watching the porch. No parent waiting with a snack. Just silence, homework, and the television for company until someone finally gets home from work. Researchers have a name for this phenomenon, and by the mid-1980s, millions of American kids were living it every single day. That kind of solitude does something to a developing brain. It doesn't just build independence, it builds a quiet, permanent understanding that nobody is coming to save you, so you'd better figure things out yourself. Then there was the parenting style waiting for them once the adults did get home. Feelings weren't really up for discussion. Consequences arrived fast, and they arrived without a long conversation about your emotional state. If you crossed a line, you found out immediately what that meant. Psychologists sometimes describe this kind of upbringing as a tightly linked cause and effect environment, where the space between an action and its consequence practically didn't exist. Grow up in that kind of household, and your brain gets very good, very early, at calculating what happens next. That's part of why people from this generation tend to seem like they're always thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. They learned that skill before they learned algebra. Meanwhile, the adults around them weren't exactly modeling stability. Divorce rates climbed through the 70s and 80s. Parents who worked decades for the same company got handed pink slips overnight during waves of corporate downsizing. The message from every adult was the same: work hard, follow the rules, and everything will be fine. Then the rules changed anyway, right in front of them. So this generation grew up building something like an emotional raincoat. Hope for sunshine, but always keep it zipped up, because the storm has shown up too many times before. Call it defensive pessimism if you want the clinical term. They'd probably just call it paying attention. That same instinct explains why you barely see this generation posting their lives online. They grew up in an era when privacy wasn't a concept you had to fight for. It was just the default setting of existence. Mess up as a teenager, and a handful of people knew about it, and then it faded. There was no permanent record, no viral clip waiting to resurface at a job interview 20 years later. So the entire idea of broadcasting your daily life to strangers doesn't feel liberating to them. It feels like handing over a weapon. It's not that they don't understand the technology, it's that they absorbed a very different lesson about safety. The less people know, the less they can use against you. Humor became armor too. Crack the joke first, keep everyone at a slight distance, laugh before anything has the chance to actually hurt. That instinct traces straight back to childhood classrooms where teachers explained nuclear annihilation in the same tone they used for a pop quiz, followed by duck and cover drills that pretended a wooden desk could stop a warhead. When the adults in your life insist the world might end tomorrow, while also telling you not to worry about it, you learn to hold 2 contradictory ideas in your head at once, and you learn to keep just enough emotional distance that nothing can catch you off guard. And yet, out of all that, came one of the most quietly intense work ethics of any generation alive today. Nobody in this group talks about their hustle online. They just show up and do the job. That ethic got built through paper routes before sunrise, grocery bagging, and fast food shifts where the register broke and you had to do the math in your head while a line of impatient customers watched. Those weren't resume-building internships. They were blunt introductions to adult responsibility, sometimes handed to actual children. Having watched their own parents get discarded by companies they'd given everything to, This generation never bought into corporate loyalty. What they believe in instead is their own competence. You can't control who gets laid off in the next round of cuts, but you can absolutely control whether you're the person everyone needs to keep. There's a strange contradiction sitting right at the center of it all. This is simultaneously the most self-sufficient generation and, quietly, one of the most collaborative. Asking for help isn't the first instinct. It's been that way since childhood, when figuring things out alone was the only option. But if someone else needs help, they show up without needing credit or an audience for it. A habit built from forming close, dependable friendships back when the adults weren't around to depend on. Authority gets a complicated reception too. Titles mean almost nothing. Competence means everything. Earn respect through actual skill, and this generation will follow you without hesitation. Show up with a fancy title and no real ability, and you'll find their patience runs out almost instantly. That skepticism was built by watching a long parade of incompetent people in positions of power make disastrous decisions throughout their entire childhood and early adulthood, from major political scandals to public health crises that were badly mishandled. Add to that some brutal timing. The youngest members graduated straight into a collapsing tech bubble, while the oldest were hitting their professional peak right as a global financial system nearly imploded. Get burned by the economy that many times, and you start building multiple income streams, not because entrepreneurship excites you, but because you've learned nothing is guaranteed to last. All that self-reliance comes with a cost, though. Some research points to a pattern where the same independence that makes this generation so capable in a crisis also makes them reluctant to lean on anyone else, even when support is available. It's not that the people aren't there. It's that asking can feel, deep down, like losing. That same mentality shaped how they process information generally. Long before search engines existed, finding an answer meant physically going somewhere, flipping through a card catalog, and searching shelf by shelf for one specific book. Knowledge cost time and effort to obtain, and because of that cost, it stuck. Cognitive researchers might call this deeper encoding, the idea that effortful learning gets locked into memory more permanently than information that arrives instantly. That same hands-on instinct extended to fixing things physically. A slipped bike chain or a flickering television didn't